Hi. I recorded this lesson several days ago when I recorded the first lesson on answering the questions that came from the Modesty lesson. And I just wanted to introduce it here by explaining that this is a continuation. These are other questions that came up that weren't quite the same type of question as the bathing suit issue that I dealt with last time. So I thought that they belonged in a separate lesson, and I hope that it's useful to you as we continue considering the principle of knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. So I hope that this lesson will be useful as we pick up with the next question. Thanks. All right, let's move on to the next question. The next question is, referring to the passages in Timothy and Peter that we read last time, does this mean we shouldn't braid hair or buy expensive clothes, or we can do that, but we should focus more on good works? Let's read the passages and look at this. In 1 Timothy chapter 2, in verses 8 through 10, it says, I desire, therefore, that the men pray everywhere, lifting up holy hands without wrath and doubting. In like manner also, that the women adorn themselves in modest apparel with propriety and moderation, not with braided hair, or gold, or pearls, or costly clothing, but which is proper for women professing godliness with good works. All right, so he says the women in general, are to dress in this way and not put on flashy things, braided hair, gold and pearls, but what's proper, what's appropriate for women professing godliness with good works being the important thing that they need to focus on. In 1 Peter 3, verses 1 through 6, Peter says, Wives, likewise, be submissive to your own husbands, that even if some do not obey the word, they without a word may be won by the conduct of their wives, when they observe your chaste conduct accompanied by fear. Do not let your adornment be merely outward, arranging the hair, wearing gold, or putting on fine apparel. Rather, let it be the hidden person of the heart, with the incorruptible beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is very precious in the sight of God. For in this manner, in former times, the holy women who trusted in God also adorned themselves, being submissive to their own husbands, as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, whose daughters you are, if you do good, and are not afraid with any terror. These passages are very similar, but I think what Peter writes can really help us get the main point of what he's saying. He's specifically writing to wives here, but it's very similar to what Paul writes about women in general. One thing to notice is that he's not restricting this to just in the church. It seems some people think that this idea of modesty and the way that they're to dress is about when they go to church. It's not. It's any time in their whole life. This is what they are to do. And the point is that women should be putting their money, their time, and their energy into doing good works, not in their personal appearance. That's not what is important in life. But in Peter's writing, there are a number of words that are in italic, meaning the translators added them. They're not what Peter actually wrote, but they're there to help understand what Peter wrote. Let's take those words out and read just this section again. Do not let your adornment be outward, arranging the hair, wearing gold, or putting on apparel. Rather, let the hidden person of the heart, which is the incorruptible, of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is very precious in the sight of God. He says here that you must not let your adornment be outward. You must not put on apparel. Now, if we read it that way, it sounds like he's saying women shouldn't wear clothes, which is obviously not the point. But the point that he's saying is don't be focused on your outward dress. Be focused on the inward person, the hidden person of the heart, the gentle and quiet spirit. What Paul talks about in Timothy is doing good works, having that modesty, that appropriateness to the situation, propriety. That is something that you need to focus on, not about being flashy and wearing gold and having fancy hair. Now, one thing we read here in Peter is he says the women of old used to do this. But we also know that women of old, such as Rebecca, wore gold rings or gold nose rings or whatever. They had the golden jewelry that they wore. And this was even provided by Abraham through his servant to give to her. This is not something that he's saying you can never wear gold. You can't wear a gold wedding ring or something like that. No, that's not the point of what they're saying. Timothy's not quite as clear about that. If you just read it through, it could be prohibiting those things. But I'm convinced that he's making the same point that Peter is making, which is about where you need to put your time and energy. But if you're really putting your time, money, and energy into doing good works and having that gentle and quiet spirit, you're not going to be like the women around you. You're not going to be doing all the same things, getting your hair done all the time, putting on all the makeup, wearing the fanciest clothes. You're not going to do that because that's not important to you. You have something much more important that you are focused on. I wonder sometimes when I see women who get their hair braided tightly on their head and then they're spending hours beating themselves on the head to loosen it up because it's giving them a headache. Is that a wise thing to do? Is that an appropriate use of your time, your money, your energy? Maybe. I don't know. I'm not an expert on women's hair. And maybe there's a good reason long term to have your hair done that way. So I'm not saying it's sinful, but I'm saying think about it. Why do you do it? What's the purpose behind it? Is there some godly reason? Is there wisdom in it? Or is it simply vanity and wanting to be like all the women around you that you shouldn't want to be like anyway? While we're on this topic, I'll just mention that Paul and Peter, through the Holy Spirit, are talking to women. They don't say these things to men. I believe the reason for that is men ought to know better. Men should not be as attracted to physical appearance and fancy clothes and all of that women are. Unfortunately, a lot of young men seem to act like women and wearing the fanciest clothes and getting fancy hairdos and things like that. They're spending a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of energy on their physical appearance. It's ridiculous. Stop being women. Be men. You shouldn't even have to be told these things. But now let's talk about the main principle we're working on in these lessons. Knowledge puffs up, but love edifies. How does that apply to this type of situation? There are brethren who are not going to believe the same thing that I do, that these passages are just talking about where you need to put your focus and your energy. And they believe it's an actual prohibition on wearing fancy clothes, expensive clothes, and braiding hair and wearing gold. Well, what do we do about them? Do we just say, well, we know better, and so we're not going to worry about what they think? No, we don't have to do any of those things, do we? And if we're concerned for our brethren, we're going to make some changes in what we do out of love for them. It's not the same as, admitting that they're right, but it's saying we care enough about them that we believe we have the liberty, but we can make changes. We can change what we do for their sake because they don't share the same knowledge that we do. All right. So another question is it wrong for girls to wear pants to church? There's a couple of questions that can help us answer that question. So the first thing we should ask is, how do the brethren at church think about women wearing pants? In society in general, is it looked down on as a bad thing? There was a time when it was wrong for women to wear pants at all. We're not talking about just at church. That it was wrong for them to wear pants because it was something that was from the feminist movement. Women didn't wear pants. Men wore pants. And when women started wearing pants, it was them acting like men, rejecting what God had given them and trying to become men. Of course, we see that in many ways still going on today, and men trying to be women as well. When we talk about wearing pants, historically it was sinful, but society's views on what's men's and women's clothing changes over time. And so in certain societies, such as America or Europe, it is no longer looked at as just men's clothing. It's accepted as women's clothing, and there's nothing wrong with women wearing pants in general. But in Africa, we have different cultures and understandings about clothes all mashed together. Even among people from the same tribe, but depending on where they live, they may have a different view on this. If you live in a rural area, you're likely to have a different view to those who live in the city. And so we need to understand that where we are and the people that are around us should affect the choices we make and how we dress. If you're coming from the city to a rural area, you should not be saying, I have a right to wear pants. I'm going to wear pants no matter what the people here think about it. If you're going from a rural area to a city, you should not be saying wearing pants is wrong and all of you people are wrong and you have to submit to my ideas of what is appropriate clothing. We need to understand that among the people where we are, there are different ideas about what's appropriate clothing. And it's not about anything God has said is sinful or right or anything like that. It's totally cultural. It's what's acceptable in the culture. And so wearing pants to church is going to partly be something that we have to ask, is it acceptable in the culture that women can wear pants at all? But then even if it is, often older brethren or maybe just some with different ideas will have a problem with women wearing pants to church. And so if that's the case, then don't do it. Have love for your brethren. Don't be distracting to them. Even if you think there's nothing wrong with it, if they do, have enough love to not do it. But there is another consideration we need to take into account, whether it's men or women wearing pants. And that's how tight are those pants? Are they actually covering your body or not? It's very popular these days to wear skinny pants. I hate them. They are ridiculous looking, but they're also not covering your nakedness. And it's not a good thing. We need to stay away from wearing things that are smaller than we are. We are supposed to be covering our nakedness, not accentuating it and putting it on display. This is not just an idea of Christians. Even the world understands this. There's a couple of country songs in America that are older songs that are not good songs, but I listened to them sometimes when I was younger on the radio. One of them is by Dolly Parton called Why'd You Come In Here Looking Like That? And it's about a man who comes in dressed in painted on jeans. Well, that means they're so tight you can just see everything as if he just had them painted on his body. And the point of that song is that that was sexually attractive to women. Well, because it's putting his nakedness on display. There's another one called Baby's Got Her Blue Jeans On, where he talks about this woman walking down the street with her blue jeans on and causing traffic jams and everything as people are watching her walk. And his point was, well, she can't help it. She was made that way. She's not doing anything wrong. Well, yes, she is. She doesn't have to put her body on display. She can cover her nakedness by wearing clothes that actually cover it. And even the world recognizes that this is a thing, that tight pants or tight clothes in general are sexually provocative. Why? Because they're not covering your nakedness. That's why. And so whether they're sexually provocative or not on you, you should be ashamed to be putting your nakedness on display. And tight pants, tight shirts, tight whatever are doing that. Let's stay away from those things. Just because we may say that in general it's okay in certain societies for a woman to wear pants, that doesn't ever make it okay for a woman or a man to wear pants that are not covering their body. We need to still cover our nakedness. We need to have that sense of shame. That's where I want to leave it today is let's work on our sense of shame. If we understand the shamefulness of nakedness, that in certain situations, yes, we must push through the embarrassment or the shame to do what has to be done, what needs to be done. And that's not sinful, but that we should not be feeling good about being seen naked. Then all these questions kind of answer themselves, don't they? If we understand about shame and about nakedness being shameful, that our bodies should be covered, that God wants us to feel that way, then we're not looking for exceptions. We're not looking for opportunities to uncover our body. We want to figure out, how can I keep my body covered in whatever situation I'm in? And if it's not possible, and I have to do something that requires me to be unclothed, then I'll do it. But I'm not going to feel happy about that. All right. I'm sure there can be other questions, and maybe I didn't do such a good job answering this, but I hope that that principle helps you answer the questions for yourself. Thanks a lot.